Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 17th episode, our target is Toy Story 2, produced by Pixar Animation Studios and distributed by Buena Vista Pictures Distribution, now Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. Toy Story 2 began production talk about only a month after the release of the first, with Disney being particularly enthusiastic about the idea, recently having began production on direct-to-DVD sequels, which the sequel was originally intended to be, with the recent Aladdin sequel, The Return of Jafar, ranking in an estimated $100 million profit. With most of Toy Story's production team working on Pixar's next film, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2 gave a chance for Pixar to expand their team. The film went through much production trouble, with a famous story being one in which 90% of the 2 years of progress had been completely erased. But thanks to technical director Galen Sussman, a recent mom who was working from home, the film was nearly completely recovered as she had a copy of the film on her home computer. Though arguably the most troubled production came from the 9 months before its release, in which the Pixar team was unhappy with the way the film was turning out and wanted to rework it, but Disney refused to change the set release date. As such, the production team that worked on the first film and had just finished production on A Bug's Life were brought in, including John Lasseter, Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, and Lee Unkrich. With this, the entire team went into extreme mode, and reportedly dedicated to their craft, worked many more hours than recommended to ensure that the movie would be in an honorable state come release day. This resulted in many employees suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome and repetitive strain injuries, with it later being said that an entire third of the staff suffered from some form of RSI by the time the film was finished. Regardless of the questionable choices to personal care, the work obviously paid off, as the film was praised endlessly by critics upon its release for being an upgrade from the original and making $511.3 million on a budget of $90 million. It became 1999's highest-grossing animated film and the third highest-grossing animated film of all time. The film released on November 24, 1999, becoming Pixar's third film after 1998's A Bug's Life and before 2001's Monsters, Inc. John Lasseter had returned as director. Andrew Stanton returned to write the screenplay alongside Rita Hizeo, Doug Chamberlain, and Chris Webb. Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, and John Lasseter returned to write the story alongside Ash Brannon. Randy Newman returned as composer, and Lee Unkrich returned as editor alongside Eddie Bleeman and David Ian Salter. The cinematography was by Sharon Callahan, and the producers were Helen Plotkin and Karen Robert Jackson. Much of the original cast returned, including Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, Don Rickles, Jim Varney, Wallace Shawn, John Ratzenberger, Annie Potts, R. Lee Ermey, Jeff Pigeon, John Morris, and Laurie Metcalf, with new cast members including Joanne Cusack, Mary Kay Bergman, Kelsey Grammer, Estelle Harris, Wayne Knight, Joe Ranft, Jodie Benson, Jonathan Harris, and Andrew Stanton. The film was nominated for 33 awards, of which it won 15 of. The film takes place not too long after the first film, with Woody and Buzz now as co-leaders among Andy's toys. Woody becomes stressed about going to cowboy camp with Andy, an event he looks forward to every year and doesn't want to get messed up. But when Andy plays with Woody and Buzz, he accidentally tears Woody's arm and decides to leave him at home on a shelf, much to Woody and the other toys' dismay. Up there, Woody finds an old toy, a squeaky toy penguin named Wheezy, whose squeaker was broken and was similarly put on the shelf. The following day, Andy's mom has a yard sale, which Wheezy becomes a part of, and so Woody goes to rescue him. He is successful, but because of his bad arm, he accidentally gets left behind and stolen by one of the customers named Al. Buzz attempts to save him but is unsuccessful, but is able to see Al's car's license plate, from which he and the other toys are able to decipher that it is the very Al who owns the toy store named Al's Toy Barn. Buzz, alongside Rex, Ham, Slinky Dog, and Mr. Potato Head, go on a quest to save him. Meanwhile, Woody is dropped off at Al's apartment, where he meets a cowgirl named Jessie, a prospector named Stinky Pete, who has never been opened from his original packaging, and a horse named Bullseye, and he learns that he is a rare toy based off of a show from the 50s called Woody's Roundup, in which he was the star, and these other toys were among the main cast, though the show was unfortunately cancelled before getting a proper finale, and ending on a cliffhanger. Al has been in search of a Woody toy so that he could sell the whole set to a museum in Japan for a large portion of money. As Buzz and the gang continues their search, Woody gets prepared and gets the opportunity to leave, though is convinced by the other toys after hearing Jessie's story about her previous owner, who abandoned her after growing up, and the prospector asking Woody how much longer he has left with Andy. Meanwhile, Buzz and the toys make it to Al's Toy Barn, only to discover Woody isn't there, and instead see Al go from the store to his apartment across the street and follow suit. However, Buzz encounters another Buzz who still believes himself to be a real space ranger and traps Buzz, assuming his place among the toys who believe him to be their Buzz. The real Buzz manages to break free and follow the toys, but in the process unknowingly releases Zurg, Buzz's arch enemy, who also doesn't know that he is a toy, and follows Buzz, who is following the fake Buzz and Andy's toys, who are tracking down Woody. The toys and the fake Buzz show up to the apartment to much confusion, only for the real Buzz to arrive and clear everything up. Then, Woody explains his side of the situation and tells the toys that he wants to stay and go to Japan, much to Buzz and the other toys' disappointment. They leave, but Woody quickly realizes his mistake and requests that Al's toys join him in going to Andy's, only for the prospector to reveal that he's left his box before, and he tightens up the vent that Andy's toys entered from, trapping Woody, Jessie, and Bullseye inside. He explains that he's been waiting for his purpose for nearly 50 years, and that he wasn't going to have his luxury spot at a museum ruined for him now. Al then shows up, forcing the toys into the suitcase, and Buzz and the gang have to follow suit to rescue them before they get on their plane. Al gets into his car, but the toys are able to follow him by using a nearby Pizza Planet truck, which contains 3 toy aliens from the claw machine in the first film, who instruct the toys on how to drive the car. Both cars arrive at the airport, with their luggage being sent through the sorting system, and Andy's toys following suit. They catch up to their case and fight Stinky Pete, who opens back up the cut in Woody's arm, but they are able to put him in a child's backpack so that he will experience what it truly means to be a toy. Then they are able to get Bullseye out of the case, but Jessie gets loaded onto the plane, and so Woody and Buzz, riding on Bullseye, chase after, just managing to get her off before the planes take off. Woody, Jessie, Bullseye, Buzz, Rex, Ham, Slinky, Mr. Potato Head, and the 3 aliens then return to Andy's just in time for his return from camp, and he enjoys playing with his new toys and even manages to fix Woody's arm and Wheezy's squeaker. The film ends with Woody and Buzz chatting about Andy growing up, and Woody stating that no matter what, they'll be there for him. There's a lot to talk about with this film, but I think a good starting point would be how the film acts as a sequel. As mentioned in previous episodes, I believe a good sequel should continue what the first did well and be able to further expand upon that original idea. Toy Story 2 is a stellar example of this. Firstly, it keeps the continuity of the first film perfectly. Mrs. Potato Head is said to be one of Molly's gifts at the end of the first film, and here she is now. When Mr. Potato Head hears this, he gets rid of his mustache in the beginning, and in the beginning of this film, it's still gone. Andy also gets a dog, and that dog, now named Buster, becomes a character and an ally in this film. Secondly, the film takes creative opportunities given by the premise of the first film and expands upon them here. It asks questions about the damage of a toy endures, and whether or not they would be better off safely in a museum, but experience no joy of having an owner. Furthermore, this plot ties into Woody's character arc perfectly. In the previous film, he had these morals that were correct, but he viewed from a biased perspective of someone who would never have to worry about following them. However, that film seeks to break that for him and force him to follow his own rules. Now, this film forces him to reconsider the accuracy of those morals in the first place, and make him completely doubt them, only to come back to them stronger than ever in the end. I'll get into more examples of this as I talk about the individual parts of the film, as this point really comes across in just about every scene. But the bottom line is that Toy Story 2 is the gold standard for how to accurately live up to the original and then surpass it. Now, let's discuss the main character of the film and his arc throughout the movie. As we just discussed, Woody's character arc perfectly continues his arc from the first film. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, it's a bit complicated because at first thought, it doesn't really make sense because the first film started and finished his arc. So, while that is true, this film perfectly works off the conclusion to his previous arc. In the first film, Woody always pushed the belief onto others that the most important thing about being a toy wasn't to get the most attention from Andy, but to be there for Andy whenever it is that he needs them. The problem with this is that Woody was in an extremely biased position saying this, as he was the favorite toy and had no fear of being replaced. When he is finally knocked off that pedestal, he has to learn how to apply what he's always said to others, to himself. Now, in this film, having fully accepted those morals, Woody is forced into a position where he now has to question those morals existing at all, something he never did even before his character arc in the first film. When Woody is stolen by Al, he immediately is eager to go home, but is forced to wait as his ripped arm leaves him in no condition to travel that far. He is further pushed to stay when he learns Jessie's tragic backstory, more on that later, and doesn't feel right about abandoning them. The Prospector, despite turning out to be the bad guy, to his credit makes a good and true point. Kids break toys. Kids also grow up. The Prospector forces Woody to think about these things. How long before Andy breaks Woody beyond repair? Or if that day never comes, what about when Andy grows up? These questions proposed by Stinky Pete make Woody question the strength of his morals and whether or not they'll end with Woody in a favorable position. This makes him come to the decision that he will go to be preserved in the museum with Stinky Pete, Jessie, and Bullseye. However, when Buzz and the gang show up to save Woody, and Woody pushes them away, he is reminded of why he had those values in the first place. It wasn't about trying to gain something, not about trying to live forever or never be hurt. It was about friendship. Woody is Andy's friend, and Woody will be there for him no matter what. If Andy breaks Woody's arm and doesn't want to play with him anymore, that's fine. Woody will still be there if Andy needs him. If Andy grows up and decides that he doesn't need him anymore, that's also fine. Woody will still be there and watch him grow up. That's what being a toy meant to Woody, and he is then able to convince Bullseye and eventually Jessie in the greatness of this, even if it has heartbreak to it. The film's central theme fits so well with the Toy Story franchise, whole branding, friendship, and the selflessness required in that. Woody knows it and shows it to Buzz in the first film, and now it's Buzz's turn to remind Woody of that. But before we get to him, we got a couple more things to discuss. Jessie is a great addition to the main cast, with easily the most heartbreaking backstory in the entire franchise. Jessie is a great example of how to introduce a new main character after the original, and how to make it feel perfectly natural. The only other good example of this that I can think of right now is Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender. A good rule of thumb with these types of characters is if you pretty much forget that they weren't in the original film until you rewatch it, that's a sign of a naturally integrated main character. I can't speak for everyone, obviously, though I will note that Toy Story is one of my favorite franchises ever, but I can't help but somewhat forget that Jessie isn't in the first Toy Story film, and I guess I should mention that the same applies for Bullseye as well. Jessie is such a brilliantly written character that speaks true to the theming of the franchise, that she feels like she's been here the whole time. Speaking of that brilliant writing, Jessie holds the record for the most truly upsetting backstory in the entire franchise. I suppose that could change with Toy Story 5, but I'm not exactly holding my breath. When Woody gets his arm fixed and is getting ready to go, the prospector encourages him to make amends with Jessie first, saying that she's been through more than he knows. He agrees, and Jessie tells him that she was only so upset with him because she knows what it's like to be abandoned. A flashback then plays showing Jessie being adored by a girl named Emily in a very similar manner to Andy with Woody. As the scene progresses, Jessie accidentally slips underneath the bed and waits for her to notice. She doesn't for a long time, and her room starts to change. Posters get replaced, and so do toys and hobbies. Years pass, and eventually Emily reaches under her bed and discovers Jessie again. Jessie is thrilled at this prospect and enjoys a car ride with her, closing her eyes and appreciating every second of this moment she's waited for so long for. When she opens her eyes again, however, she discovers that she's been placed in a box with other stuff, waiting by a donation truck, with Emily driving away. If this wasn't sad enough, there's a horribly sweet song playing in the background of this, with lyrics that just perfectly amplify the emotion so much. Such a surprisingly sad moment that can easily catch any viewer off guard and make them cry. Such a simple and short and yet horribly devastating thing to watch. And what's more, this is the moment of change for Woody. He hears this and is terrified of the prospect of this happening to him. Because like I said, the beginning of the flashback with Jessie and Emily is eerily similar to the scenes with Woody and Andy. Jessie's arc, though, is extremely satisfying as well. Woody convinces her on his moral of what it means to be a friend and the selflessness required, so that, even in heartbreak, you know to still be there for that person. Jessie agrees to go with Woody to Andy's and try being a toy again, despite knowing what this could eventually mean. Now that while we're on the topic, I suppose I should briefly discuss the music in the film. And I do mean briefly, because if you don't count the You've Got a Friend in Me reprise, then the film only has 2 songs with lyrics, but I guess I'll still discuss each. I won't bother ranking them because I think the previous segment made it pretty clear which is taking the number 1 spot. The first song is the theme song to the TV show Woody is from, Woody's Roundup. It really didn't need to be that catchy, but it is. The song is really fun, and while somewhat ruined with the characters occasionally talking over it, the full version is available and is great. Then, of course, there's When She Loved Me, the song that plays over Jessie's backstory. I won't even bother discussing it anymore. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, it probably goes without saying, but seek it out. The movie is also home to some great non-lyrical tracks, such as the opening one, but those are much harder to discuss, so I'll simply state that the film has great music throughout. Now we can talk about the third main character in the film, Buzz Lightyear, as well as the side characters that accompany him. As I've stated before, I really like how Buzz essentially takes over Woody's role in the first film. Where in the first film, Woody had to teach Buzz the joys of being a toy, it is now Buzz's turn to remind him of that. While that is great, the one unintended consequence of this is that it doesn't leave much room for Buzz himself to have a character arc, rather just getting the opportunity to prove his lesson learned in the first film. Luckily, however, this is essentially a non-issue, because the B-plot of the film, that is Buzz and the toys searching for Woody, is a ton of fun. In the first film, the only locations in the film were Andy's house, Pizza Planet, and Sid's house. That's really about it, and largely because of the limits of the technology at the time. That is why this plot is so impressive, because only 4 years later, and the plot now has the toys doing a search across town for Woody. It's not only fun on a technical scale though, because the adventure is also just a ton of fun and creative. A large part of the reason why is because of the dynamics between Buzz, Slinky, Ham, and Mr. Potato Head and Rex. They are all extremely fun and unique in their own special way, and they all bounce off of each other extremely well. or if you were to take any two of them, you would probably have a pretty good idea of their relationship with each other. On top of that, the set pieces they explore are great, from the scenes of them crossing the road while hiding under traffic cones, to driving a toy car through the aisles of Al's toy barn. And of course the plot where Buzz gets replaced with a different Buzz who assumes his identity, and then Buzz has to go after him in the process releasing a Zurg toy who begins chasing him down, leading to what is essentially a four-group chase. It's so complicated yet executed beautifully and simply. The other Buzz and Zurg fight is also amazing. They're both really funny characters, and their final battle is really great. I didn't even get a chance to mention that they brought back the toy aliens. Yeah, they're also pretty fun. Bottom line is, the B plot, while not super deep thematically, is incredibly fun and doesn't feel like a waste of time or like it had missed potential. Speaking of villains, let's discuss the other two in the film, Al and Stinky Pete. Firstly, Al, who is similar to Sid from the first film, feels more like an antagonist than a villain. He doesn't know that the toys are alive, so any evil actions aren't done with any personal motivation behind it. Not to say that Al is a good person. He was completely willing to steal a toy that he was told was an old family toy, just so that he could profit, but he doesn't really have any evil actions above that. To compare him to Sid again, he actually treats the toys with a lot of care and respect for the entirety of the film. It's kind of funny how obsessed he is with money, and he also has some funny jokes throughout, but there's not really a whole lot else to discuss with him. On the other hand, Stinky Pete has a lot to talk about. Similar to Monsters, Inc. with Randall and Mr. Waternoose, Al and Stinky Pete really benefit from having each other, even if they're not working together towards the same goal. While Al takes up the majority of the film as the central antagonist / opposing force, Stinky Pete takes over in the end to deliver a twist for the finale and to fill the void of a villain to overcome. His twist of being a villain I found to be really well done, because I wouldn't even really say he became a villain. More so, he was just put in a scenario where he would finally get what he wanted, but when that chance begins to slip again, he goes to desperate measures to ensure that he gets what he's waited for. He comes with a pretty good backstory, too. When Woody's roundup was cancelled due to the sudden craze of astronauts after the moon landing, Pete was put on a dime shelf and still didn't get bought. He waited forever until being collected by Al, with the hopes put into him that he would one day be preserved forever in a museum away from the worries of children. When Woody finally comes along, the collection is complete and the museum awaits and seems closer than ever. But when Woody is eager to go back, the Prospector has to put a stop to it. What's really interesting is that Pete, up until the ending at least, works entirely in the shadows. He tries to convince Woody of the pains that come with being owned by a child, and he sabotages Woody's plan of escape, using Jessie as an easy target for Woody to pin the crime on, given their already unfriendly relationship with each other. Meanwhile, on the surface of things, Pete seems like a kind person, prone to stop conflict that he himself created, and encouraging the gang about the wonders of the museum. Stinky Pete makes for a really good villain. His twist is really well set up, and his turn from persuasion to acting makes for a really good and intense finale. I give Toy Story 2 a 10 out of 10 for being a great film from start to finish. A great time with a great A and B plot, great characters with great character moments, and amazing themes. It is the gold standard for a perfect sequel and does wonders for the franchise as a whole, meeting the expectations of the first film and then exceeding them. I can't wait to finish the trilogy and review the third one, but that'll have to wait for another day. And perhaps a day that is rather far away, as I really want to make sure to do it justice. Welp, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.